The hum of family chatter floated through the dining room. Silverware clinked gently against porcelain, and candlelight danced over polished crystal glasses. Everything looked beautiful. But inside me, something didn't feel right. I sat quietly, smiling through the discomfort in my chest, unaware that I was seconds away from a revelation that would shatter my world. I was 65. My name was Helen, and I had been married to Frank for 43 years. We had built a life filled with rituals, shared meals, laughter, and the kind of silence that felt warm, not cold. I thought I knew everything about him. His habits, his tells, even his deepest fears. I thought I knew my son, Adam, just as well. He was my pride, my only child, and I had watched him grow from a shy boy with skinned knees to a kind, if slightly naive man. 3 years ago, he had married a woman named Callie. Elegant, calculating, and much younger than him. I had never said this out loud, not even to Frank, but from the moment Callie entered our lives, I had felt something off. That evening, we were all gathered around the long mahogany dining table that had once belonged to my grandmother. I had set it with my finest china and lit the crystal chandelier Frank had gifted me on our 20th anniversary. It should have been a perfect family dinner. I had roasted lamb with rosemary, mashed sweet potatoes with nutmeg, and baked a cranberry tart, Adam's favorite. He smiled at me across the table and said, "Mom, you've really outdone yourself. This is amazing." I smiled back, but something in me hesitated. I felt like a performer on stage, delivering lines I had said 100 times before. Everything looked normal. Sounded normal. But beneath the surface, I felt it, like the heavy sky before a summer storm. Callie was glowing, but not with the gentle joy of someone content. No, her glow had sharp edges. She kept glancing around the table, one hand occasionally brushing her stomach, as if reminding us, or herself, of something important. Frank, meanwhile, sat quietly at the head of the table. His silver hair neatly combed, eyes focused too intently on his plate. He hadn't looked me in the eye for weeks now, and tonight was no different. The man who used to reach across the table to squeeze my hand now acted like my touch might burn him. Callie raised her glass of water and smiled sweetly. "Helen is such an inspiration," she said, her tone thick with syrup. "Such a devoted wife, a devoted mother. You've really set the bar high." The way she said, "devoted," made my skin crawl. I nodded politely and replied, "Thank you, Callie. That's kind of you to say." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She dabbed her lips with her napkin, her green eyes fixed on mine. "I've been thinking a lot about vows lately," she said lightly. "For better or worse. In sickness and in health. Through all kinds of challenges." She looked meaningfully at Frank as she said the last part. Adam reached over and squeezed her hand, his expression warm and oblivious. "Marriage is about building something together," he said with sincerity only someone like him could muster. "Oh yes," Callie replied. "Or sometimes, sharing what's already been built." Something in the way she said that made my stomach knot. It was casual, but her tone had teeth. I looked at Frank again. He was still avoiding me, eyes now locked on a piece of lamb he hadn't touched. Then Callie stood slowly and smoothed her dress. "I have news," she said. "News that will change everything." Adam's eyes lit up. "You're pregnant?" he blurted out. Callie smiled and nodded. "I'm pregnant." Adam jumped up and hugged her. "That's amazing. Mom, Dad, you're going to be grandparents." His excitement was real and unfiltered. He looked like a boy again. But I couldn't feel what I was supposed to feel. Not joy. Not pride. Something ugly twisted in my gut, because over his shoulder, I caught the look Callie gave Frank. And Frank finally looked up at her. I forced a smile. "Congratulations," I said. But I didn't mean it. Not in that moment. And Callie wasn't done. As Adam poured sparkling juice for a toast, Callie walked slowly around the table and stopped behind my chair. She bent down like she was going to whisper something sweet. Instead, she murmured directly in my ear, "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you pathetic old woman." The blood drained from my face. My hand clutched the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I could barely breathe. My chest was tight. My heart pounded in my ears. And yet I laughed. A clear, startling laugh that echoed through the dining room. "Don't worry, dear," I said calmly. Everything will work out just fine. Callie blinked. That wasn't the reaction she had expected. She looked briefly unsettled, like a chess player whose opponent had made an unexpected move. I sat there, still smiling, as my entire world unraveled beneath my feet. Adam was still talking about the nursery and baby names. Frank stared at his plate like it held the answers to everything. I looked at my husband, and in that moment, something inside me broke. The last thread of certainty. The final breath of denial. I raised my glass, smiled at my son, and toasted to a future I no longer recognized. That night, after they left, I washed the dishes with hands that barely felt the water. Frank appeared in the doorway. His voice barely a whisper. "Helen." "Not tonight," I said. He stood there for a moment, then turned and went upstairs. I stayed behind, alone in my spotless kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been my family. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay next to him, wide awake, listening to the sounds of a house I thought I knew. The creak of floorboards, the hum of the fridge, and the quiet, steady breathing of the man I no longer trusted. I stared into the dark and wondered, how long had I been living with strangers? The next morning arrived with the kind of quiet that felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. I moved through my routine as if I were someone else wearing my body. Pouring coffee, scrambling eggs, slicing toast the way Frank liked it. Everything looked the same. But I wasn't the same. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room that felt insulting. Frank was buried behind the newspaper, his face hidden behind headlines and columns of ink. He hadn't said a word since waking. "Sleep well?" he asked, still not looking up. "Fine," I lied. He nodded and flipped a page, the rustle of the newspaper louder than usual in the thick silence between us. "I'll be working in the garden today," he said after a pause. "Roses need trimming before the frost hits." Those words struck something in me. How many times had he said that exact sentence? Working in the garden. Tending the roses. It had become his refuge lately, his excuse for everything. And suddenly I wondered, was that where it had all started? Out there, in the flower beds, under the guise of fertilizer and pruning shears? After he left, I sat alone at the table, my coffee turning cold. I stared at the slice of toast on my plate, then pushed it aside. My appetite had vanished. I needed answers. And I was tired of pretending. The clues had always been there, hadn't they? But I hadn't connected them. I had brushed off the odd moments, the unexplained receipts, the quiet conversations that stopped the second I walked into a room. 3 months ago, Frank started showering twice a day. Once in the morning, and again in the early evening after working in the yard. I remember asking him once, teasingly, if he was planning to seduce me with roses and cologne. He had chuckled, said he didn't want to smell like mulch. I hadn't thought twice about it. 2 months ago, I found a credit card bill tucked into a drawer. The charges didn't make sense. A jewelry shop in a nearby town, an expensive florist I had never visited. When I asked about it, he smiled and said he was planning something for our anniversary. Our anniversary was still 6 months away. And 6 weeks ago, Callie started showing up more. Always when Adam was at work. Always with a reason. Asking for recipes, wanting help with party planning, chatting about baby books. I remember catching them once, Frank and Callie, speaking in hushed voices near the back porch. When I stepped out, they both jumped slightly. "Just talking about the garden," Frank had said. "Callie's interested in roses." Callie. Interested in roses. The woman who once said dirt under her nails made her feel feral. I had been so blind. A sharp ring shattered the silence. The phone. I picked it up, my voice steady. "Mom." Adam's voice was bright. Bubbling. "Did you sleep at all?" I couldn't close my eyes. I'm still in shock. I keep thinking about the nursery. Callie wants to do a woodland theme. She's been on Pinterest since sunrise. I closed my eyes. "That sounds sweet." He laughed. She also said something interesting. That Dad got emotional when she told him. Isn't that something? My hand tightened on the receiver. When she told him? Yeah. She told him last week. Said she wanted him to hear it first. She was nervous about how you'd both react. Last week. Callie had told Frank about the baby a full week before she told Adam. Before the dinner. Before the toast. Why? Why would she tell him first? Unless... Mom? You still there? Yes, I managed. Just thinking about everything we need to prepare. After I hung up, I stared at the wall for what felt like hours. The puzzle was no longer missing pieces. It was falling into place with disturbing clarity. The stolen glances. The whispered conversations. The smugness in Callie's expression as she rubbed her stomach. I knew I couldn't confront Frank yet. If I was wrong, if this was paranoia, a mind desperate to make sense of betrayal, then I'd burn a marriage that had lasted 4 decades. But if I was right, I needed proof. The next morning, after Frank left for his doctor's appointment, I went up to his study. That room had always been his quiet place. I rarely went in without knocking. But that day, I opened the heavy oak door and stepped inside like I had every right. Because I did. The room smelled like his aftershave and aged books. His desk sat in its usual place, everything neatly arranged. I hesitated for a moment. Then opened the top drawer. Pens. Notepads. Business cards. Second drawer, bills, letters from friends, some birthday cards. And then the bottom drawer. Beneath a stack of gardening magazines, I found a folder. Thick. Hidden. My hands trembled as I opened it. Bank statements. But not for our joint account. This was a private checking account. One I didn't know existed. Deposits of $5, $8, even $12,000. Withdrawals. All in cash. All in round numbers. 2,000. 3,500. 7,000. Where had this money come from? And where had it gone? My heart was racing. I snapped photos with my phone, though my hands were shaking so hard I had to retake several. I returned everything exactly as I had found it, then closed the drawer. I wasn't done. Not even close. From the window, I saw Callie's silver sedan pull into the driveway. She stepped out in a flowing sundress that clung to her waist, blonde hair shining in the sun. She didn't head toward the front door. She walked straight toward the garden. Toward Frank. I stayed behind the curtain, watching. She greeted him warmly. Too warmly. Her hand rested on his arm. She leaned close to whisper something that made him smile. Really smile, in a way I hadn't seen in months. They talked for 20 minutes. Then she looked up at the house. I ducked out of sight, heart thudding like I had been caught eavesdropping on a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. Because maybe I had. When I peeked again, she was gone. But Frank, he looked lighter. Happier. As if a weight had been lifted from his chest. That night, over dinner, he was animated. He talked about planting tulips next spring. About becoming a grandfather. About baby names and cribs. I stared at him across the table, looking for guilt. But what I saw was relief. She stopped by today, I said carefully. Frank nodded. Yeah. She's worried. Wanted reassurance. What kind of reassurance? He hesitated. Just for a second. First-time mom stuff. Health. Finances. Doubts. But I didn't believe him. Not anymore. That night, as he snored beside me, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to the dark. I will find out the truth. No matter how much it hurts. The next day began under a gray sky, the kind of dull, heavy clouds that seemed to press down on everything. It matched my mood perfectly. Frank left the house early, claiming he needed supplies from the hardware store. He kissed my cheek out of habit, not warmth, and walked out the door with a small nod. I stood there for a moment after he left, still in my robe, holding my coffee like it was the only solid thing left in my life. But I wasn't going to waste the day sitting in silence. I had a mission now. I needed answers, and if Frank wasn't going to tell me the truth, then I'd find it myself. I waited until his car disappeared down the street, then climbed the stairs with quiet determination. My destination was Adam's old room, now the guest room, the place where Callie often stayed during her daytime visits. It had become her little sanctuary in our house. The room was pristine, decorated in soft blues and whites, like something out of a hotel catalog. But Callie had added her touches. A silk scarf draped on the chair. A half-empty bottle of fancy lotion. A stack of fashion magazines on the window seat. It didn't feel like a guest room anymore. It felt like hers. I started with the dresser. The top drawers held exactly what you'd expect. Folded clothes, a few hair accessories, nothing unusual. But the bottom drawer, that's where I found it. A manila folder, tucked underneath a stack of sweaters. I pulled it out slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Inside were papers. A lot of them. And what I saw made my stomach twist. Bank statements in Adam's name. Withdrawals in huge amounts. $15,000. $25,000. $30,000. And they weren't just from one account. There were credit card applications, personal loan documents, and handwritten notes in Callie's neat script. Notes that listed loans, bank names, and frightening dollar amounts. It didn't add up. Adam didn't make that kind of money. These weren't his choices. These were someone else's plans using his name. I took out my phone and snapped pictures of every single page. I didn't know what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I had to hold on to proof. When I heard a sound downstairs, the front door closing, I panicked. I shoved the folder back in place and crept to the window. There it was. Callie's silver car in our driveway. She was already walking toward the house. I raced down the stairs, trying to act normal. When she opened the door with the key we'd given her after the wedding, I was standing in the kitchen like I had nothing to hide. "Helen," she said cheerfully, hanging her purse on the chair. "Hope you don't mind me letting myself in. Thought I'd drop by for a little chat." "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be lovely." As I turned to the coffee machine, I could feel her eyes on me. Watching. Studying. "You seem nervous," she said with a slight tilt of her head. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied again, setting her cup on the table. She took a sip. "I imagine you've got a lot on your mind. New babies can be overwhelming. Especially when they're unexpected." That line hit me hard. She wasn't just talking. She was prodding me, seeing how much I knew. She looked different that day. Not the sweet daughter-in-law she usually pretended to be. She looked sharper, colder, like someone who had taken off a mask. I sat down across from her. "Callie," I said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you tell Frank about the pregnancy before you told Adam?" She froze. Just for a split second. Her hand stopped midair, holding her cup. "I was nervous," she said carefully. "I wanted to make sure I'd be supported. Frank has always been kind to me. I felt like I could trust him." "Kind," I repeated. "Very kind." She leaned forward, locking eyes with me. "Has he mentioned that I've been having some difficulties?" "What kind of difficulties?" "Oh, you know. Financial stress. Life can be hard when you're young and still figuring things out." I stayed quiet. She continued, her voice cool but measured. "Sometimes people make choices that get complicated. Choices they regret. Choices that require understanding." My chest tightened. "What kind of choices?" She gave a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. "The kind that need help. And understanding. And sometimes secrets." She sipped her coffee like she had just told me the weather. Then her gaze shifted toward the garden window. Frank and Marcus, our gardener, were outside, standing near the shed, deep in conversation. Frank was gesturing, Marcus shaking his head. The tension between them was clear, even from here. Callie's face changed instantly. Her smile dropped. Something like panic flickered across her eyes. "Excuse me," she said suddenly, pushing back her chair. "I need to speak with them." I followed, not far behind. The moment she stepped outside, the men went quiet. Like kids caught stealing cookies. "Is everything all right?" she asked. But her voice was no longer sweet. It was sharp. Marcus looked at her, then at Frank, then at me. His face was pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I can't keep doing this," he said quietly. "This isn't right. Adam's a good man. He doesn't deserve this." "We've discussed this," Callie snapped. Her tone was cold now. Controlling. "What have you discussed?" I asked. All three of them turned to face me. The guilt on their faces was enough to make me feel sick. "Bess," Frank started, his voice tight, "you shouldn't be out here." In my own backyard? I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Tell me what's going on. Silence. Thick, uncomfortable silence. Then Marcus spoke. There are things you should know, he said. Things about. That's enough, Callie cut in. Marcus ignored her. She's been making Frank lie. Threatening him. Using Adam's name to take out loans. She made him think he was helping her, but she's been pulling the strings the whole time. I could barely breathe. Frank looked at the ground. His eyes filled with shame. I never cheated on you, he said, his voice trembling. It was all an act. To protect Adam. To protect us. Callie's laugh was like glass breaking. Oh please, she said. Don't act like the victim, Frank. We all made choices. And some secrets are worth a lot more than others. I looked at Marcus. What kind of secrets? He looked me in the eye. The baby, he said. It's not Adam's. It's mine. The world shifted. I felt dizzy. Like the ground beneath me had cracked wide open. Frank's face was white. Callie stood frozen, lips pressed together, eyes empty. And I just stood there, staring at them, as everything I thought I knew fell apart. I didn't move for a long time after hearing Marcus's words. My legs felt like they'd forgotten how to work. My hands hung by my sides, fingers numb, and the world around me was strangely quiet. I could still hear the rain hitting the leaves, but everything else, Callie's breathing, Frank's silence, Marcus's regret, seemed far away. The baby isn't Adam's. It was Marcus's voice that said it, but it echoed in my head like it had come from inside me. Callie didn't say anything at first. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry or yell. She just crossed her arms and looked away, like she was waiting for the storm to pass. I turned to Frank. You knew? I asked, but I already knew the answer. He nodded. Barely. Not at first. But then yes. I knew. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And you let me believe you were cheating on me? His face crumbled. I didn't want to. I hated it. Every second. But she said if I didn't play along, she'd ruin Adam. She showed me the loans. The credit cards. The gambling records. He was drowning. Helen. She said she could protect him, but only if I played along. I turned to Marcus. And you? How did you get into this? He looked devastated. I never meant for any of this to happen. She used to come to the garden and talk while I worked. Said she was lonely. Said Frank didn't listen. I believed her. She seemed so sad. I didn't know it was part of something bigger. It was one time. And then she told me she was pregnant. And said it was Frank's. His voice cracked, and I could see tears in his eyes. I didn't even know she told anyone it was mine until just now. Callie finally spoke. You're all being dramatic. Things got complicated. That's all. Complicated. I said, my voice shaking. You married my son. Then you stole his name, his money, and now you're carrying someone else's child. She didn't flinch. I made the best choices I could with what I had. No, I said softly. You made selfish choices. And you lied to everyone. There was a long silence. Then she looked straight at me. So what now, Helen? You going to destroy everything? Break Adam's heart? Burn down your own family? I stared at her, and in that moment, I saw her for who she really was. Not the pretty girl who played innocent in front of my son. Not the smiling daughter-in-law who pretended to love our traditions. No. I saw the woman who had carefully twisted all of us into knots and smiled while doing it. I don't need to destroy anything, I said quietly. The truth has already done that. She rolled her eyes and walked back toward the house without another word. Marcus followed, but slower, still looking stunned. Frank and I stayed behind in the garden. Neither of us said anything for a long time. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed while Frank paced the room. I wanted to tell you, he said. So many times. But I didn't know how. You should have trusted me, I said. I would have helped Adam too. I would have done anything for him. I know, he whispered. I just didn't want you to look at him the way you looked at your father. That stopped me. My heart sank. You remembered that? He nodded slowly. You told me once. About how your father lost everything to gambling. How you had to move out of your home. How you couldn't forgive him. That was different, I said. He never tried to change. And Adam will? He's not like my father, I whispered. He has a good heart. He got lost. Frank sat beside me. Then we'll help him find his way back. I nodded. We sat in silence for a while. No more lies. No more pretending. The next day, Marcus was gone. He left a note, tucked under a flower pot near the back door. His handwriting was shaky, and the words simple. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. I'm leaving town. Please forgive me. I folded the note and put it in a drawer. I didn't feel hate for him. If anything, I felt sad. He had gotten pulled into something bigger than he could handle. Just like the rest of us. A few days passed. The house felt quieter than usual. Even the air felt different. Adam hadn't called, and Callie hadn't returned since that day in the garden. I thought I was ready to move on. I thought the worst was behind us. But fate wasn't done with me yet. It was Tuesday morning. I had just finished cleaning the guest bathroom when I noticed something behind the toilet. A crumpled white envelope. It must have fallen from Callie's purse. I hesitated. Then picked it up. Inside was a single piece of paper. Thick, medical paper. At the top, Gene Tech Laboratories. My hands began to shake. It was a DNA test. I sat down on the closed toilet seat and read the results. Slowly. Carefully. Like the words might change if I read them too fast. Mother, Callie Louise Reynolds. Alleged father 1. Adam Reynolds, excluded, 0% probability. Alleged father 2. Marcus James Delgado, not excluded, 99.7% probability. I stared at the numbers. The baby wasn't Adam's. And it wasn't Frank's either. It was Marcus's. I held the paper in both hands. It trembled in my grip. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. She had lied to everyone. And now I had proof. But the question wasn't just what she did anymore. The question was, what was I going to do with the truth? I held the paper in my lap for what felt like hours. The DNA results were clear. There was no guessing. No misunderstanding. The baby wasn't Adam's. And it definitely wasn't Frank's. It was Marcus's. And she had known that all along. I wondered why she even had the test done. If she was trying so hard to lie and control the story, why take the risk? Why leave a paper trail? Then it hit me. She never planned to hide the truth forever. She planned to use it, as backup, as blackmail, as insurance. She could claim she was manipulated, that Frank had pressured her, that she was just a young woman scared and confused. With this document, she could play the victim whenever it suited her. That's why she had it. That's why she never told Adam or Frank or anyone. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan, just as I heard the creak of footsteps on the stairs. Callie. She appeared in the bathroom doorway a second later, trying to act casual, but I saw the flicker of tension in her eyes. She scanned the room quickly, like she knew something was missing. Helen, she said with a small smile, I didn't know you were upstairs. Just checking the faucets, I said calmly, standing to face her. You know how these old pipes can be. Her eyes flicked toward the toilet, then back to me. You didn't see anything strange, did you? I think I dropped something. I held her gaze. My hand pressed lightly over the pocket holding the DNA results. No, I said evenly. Nothing at all. She paused for just a moment, her lips parting slightly as if she might say more. Then she gave a tight nod. I'm sure it'll turn up. She turned and left. And I stood there alone again, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked tired, but behind the weariness was something stronger. Clarity. The lies had to stop. But the truth couldn't come out all at once. Not like a hammer. I had to be careful. If I wasn't, Adam would be the one destroyed. And he didn't deserve that. He deserved the truth, yes, but not the shame and guilt that would crush him in front of everyone. He had already been manipulated, already made to carry a weight that didn't belong to him. I had to protect him. That evening, after dinner, I found Frank in his study. He was pretending to read, but I knew he wasn't seeing the words. I knocked gently on the doorframe. He looked up, and the moment our eyes met, he knew something had changed. "Can we talk?" I asked. He nodded and set his book aside. I sat down across from him and pulled the folded DNA results from my pocket, laying them on the desk between us. The paper looked almost harmless, clean, white, official. But Frank's face went pale as he read it. "She dropped it," I said quietly. "In the bathroom. I found it this morning." Frank didn't say anything for a long time. Then he looked at me, eyes full of disbelief. "So it's not mine. Not Adam's. It's Marcus's." I nodded. His shoulders slumped like something heavy had finally broken inside him. "Bess," he whispered. "I can't believe she lied like that. I mean, I can. But not like this." "She didn't just lie," I said. "She built everything around that lie. She knew what she was doing." He looked up, tired and broken. "What do we do?" I took a deep breath. "We end it. But we don't burn everything down in the process. I won't let Adam suffer because of her. I won't shame him in front of everyone. He's been hurt enough." Frank nodded slowly. "He deserves the truth." "Yes. But the right way." We talked for hours that night. We made a plan. We went over every detail. We would wait. We would invite them to dinner. One final dinner. Just us and them. No drama. No yelling. Just the truth. And proof. We would put the truth on the table and let it speak for itself. I spent the next 3 days preparing like I was planning a wedding. I cooked Adam's favorite dishes: roast chicken with herbs, buttery mashed potatoes, fresh rolls, and an apple pie from my grandmother's recipe. The smell filled the house with memories of simpler times, before the lies, before the weight of secrets. Frank helped me set the table. We used the good china again, the same set I had pulled out for the dinner that changed everything. Only this time, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. On Sunday afternoon, I called Adam. "I want to have a little celebration," I told him. "For the baby. Just a small dinner. Just us." He was delighted. "That sounds great, Mom. Callie was worried you were upset about something. This will really help." If only he knew. When they arrived, Callie was glowing. Dressed in another flowing maternity gown, her makeup flawless, her smile wide. She kissed my cheek like nothing had ever happened. "Helen, everything smells amazing," she said. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "No trouble at all," I replied, smiling. "Family's always worth the effort." Adam beamed. "She's the best, isn't she?" We sat down and began with small talk. Callie described pregnancy symptoms, Adam shared updates from work, and Frank made gentle comments about the weather and the garden. It all felt normal. Painfully, bitterly normal. But I was watching her. Every move. Every word. She was calm. Confident. She thought the worst had passed. She thought she was safe. I waited until the main course was done. The table was full. The house was warm. The silence between us had settled into something comfortable. Then I said, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about family traits." Callie's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Genetics," I added. "How I color hair, even height can pass down through generations." Adam smiled. "You always said I got Dad's eyes and your stubborn streak." Callie chuckled lightly. "Genetics are strange, aren't they?" "They are," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Especially now that science can tell us so much. Even before a baby is born. DNA, paternity, all of it." The room went very quiet. Callie sat perfectly still. Her breathing changed, shallow and quick. Adam, sweet Adam, was still smiling, unaware of the storm hanging over him. I reached to the sideboard and pulled out a plain manila envelope. I returned to the table and placed it gently in front of Callie. "I believe you dropped this in my bathroom last week," I said. She didn't touch it. Her face went pale. Adam looked confused. "What is it?" he asked. "Don't," she whispered. But he had already picked it up. He read the first lines. His hands started to tremble. Then his whole face changed. "Marcus?" he said, his voice small and broken. "Who is Marcus?" "Our former gardener," Frank said softly. Adam turned to Callie. "Is this real?" "Tell me this isn't real." She opened her mouth but didn't speak. Her mask was gone now. There was no way out. "The baby's not mine?" he asked again. "It's his," she finally whispered. "It wasn't supposed to happen." Adam stood up from the table like he'd been shot. "I trusted you," he said, his voice cracking. "I gave you everything. And you lied." I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. And in that moment I knew. The truth had broken him. But it had also set him free. Adam stood there like his legs might give out. His hands were shaking, his mouth slightly open, but no words came out at first. He just stared at Callie, like he was trying to understand what kind of person was sitting across from him. "The baby, it's not mine?" he asked again, more to himself than anyone else. Callie didn't deny it. She didn't even try to explain right away. She just sat with her back straight and her eyes blank, like a child caught in a lie with no idea how to fix it. Frank shifted in his seat, his head in his hands. "I should have told you," he whispered to Adam. "I should have told you everything from the start." Adam turned toward his father, his eyes full of disbelief. "You knew?" Frank nodded slowly. "Not at first. But when she started using your debt to threaten me, I played along. I let her pretend that I was the father." Adam blinked, like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "You let me believe you cheated on Mom? You pretended to have an affair with her?" "I thought I could protect you," Frank said. "I thought I could fix everything before it blew up." Adam ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth behind his chair. "This is insane. I can't believe this is real." Callie finally spoke. Her voice was soft and low, as if she was already defeated. "I didn't plan to fall for Marcus. It wasn't supposed to happen." Adam turned on her, his voice rising for the first time. "So you were sleeping with me, taking my money, lying to my family, and also seeing him? What, was it all a game?" She looked down at her hands. "I was scared. We were drowning in bills. You weren't paying attention. You were gambling. I didn't know what to do." "Don't blame me for your lies," Adam said sharply. "Yes, I had a problem. But you made it worse." Callie didn't answer. Frank looked at Adam, his eyes full of regret. "Son, I let her use me to cover her tracks. I thought if I played along, she'd stop pushing you into more debt. But it was never about helping you. She just wanted control." Adam looked completely lost. He turned to me now, as if I could give him something to hold on to. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" My heart ached for him. Because I didn't know everything until a few days ago. And then, I wanted you to hear the truth, not just from me, but from the people who caused it. He sat down slowly, breathing hard. "I feel like such a fool." "You're not," I said. "You trusted someone you loved. That's not foolish. That's human." Callie wiped at the corner of her eye. "I didn't mean for it to end like this." "But you didn't mean for it to be honest either," I replied. She looked up at me then, something cold and calculating back in her eyes. "So what happens now? Are you going to throw me out?" I met her gaze calmly. "You're leaving. Tonight. And the baby?" she asked, her voice suddenly louder, desperate. "You're really going to turn your back on your grandchild?" I didn't blink. "That baby is Marcus's child. And you never gave us a chance to be grandparents. You took that from us the moment you decided to lie." "I don't have anywhere to go," she said, her voice shaking now. "My parents won't take me back. I have no money." "You had options," I said gently. "But you burned them all." She looked at Adam again, but he had already turned away. I stood up and walked into the hallway, pulling out an envelope from the drawer by the phone. I handed it to her. "This is the address of Marcus's sister in Phoenix. I called her. She's willing to take you in until the baby's born." Callie stared at the envelope, like it was some kind of trick. You did that for me?" "I did it for the baby," I said. "He deserves a chance. And so do you. But you won't find that here." She left an hour later. Her suitcases were packed neatly by the door. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She looked tired. Hollow. Like someone who had finally run out of lies to tell. When she stepped outside and walked to her car, the silence she left behind felt heavy but strangely peaceful. I stood by the window and watched her drive away. And when she turned the corner at the end of our street, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Adam stayed in his old room that night. He didn't speak much. I brought him tea, sat by his side, and just stayed quiet. Sometimes the best thing a mother can do is not say anything at all. The next morning, over breakfast, he finally spoke. "I need help," he said quietly. "With the gambling." I reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll help you." Frank nodded. "We'll do it together." Adam started attending meetings a few days later. He went every week, sometimes twice a week. He slowly began to look more like himself again. More grounded. More real. He stopped blaming himself for Callie's lies and started forgiving himself for the mistakes he had made. And then one day, months later, he met someone new. Her name was Sarah. She worked at the community library and had a soft laugh that filled the room like sunlight. She didn't care about money or appearances. She cared about honesty. And love. And quiet dinners where no one had to pretend to be something they weren't. When they told us they were expecting, it was different. No secrets. No drama. Just joy. And when their daughter was born, a little girl with Adam's eyes and Sarah's laugh, I held her in my arms and felt something deep inside me heal. Callie sent us a letter a few months after leaving. It was short. Just a photo of a baby boy with dark hair and Marcus's kind eyes. On the back, in her handwriting, it said, "His name is David. Thank you for giving me a second chance." I didn't feel hatred when I read it. Only a quiet peace. Because in the end, the truth had won. And we had survived it. Life settled into something calm after Callie left. Not perfect. Not easy. But calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm so big, you don't try to clean up everything at once. You just sit and breathe, grateful you're still standing. Frank and I found our way back to each other slowly. We didn't rush. We didn't pretend nothing had happened. Every night, we sat in the living room, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, both of us holding cups of tea that went cold before we finished them. One night, he reached for my hand without saying anything. I didn't pull away. And in that simple moment, I realized something important. He had made mistakes. But he had also carried a weight that wasn't his to carry, because he believed it would protect our son. He had suffered too. I squeezed his hand back. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said that night, his voice soft and tired. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to hide it," I replied. We both had regrets. But we also had each other. And that still meant something. Meanwhile, Adam was doing the hard work. He never missed a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. He even asked Frank to come with him to one of the sessions. I went with him the week after that. We listened to others share their stories. Men and women who had lost jobs, homes, families. I could see the pain in Adam's eyes as he realized how close he had come to losing everything. But I also saw strength in him that I hadn't seen in a long time. He was trying. And every day, he grew a little more into the man I had always believed he could be. Months passed. The holidays came. Then the new year. And slowly, our family filled in the quiet spaces that Callie's chaos had left behind. One evening in February, Adam walked into the kitchen with a shy smile on his face. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course," I replied. "There's someone I'd like you to meet. Her name's Sarah." Sarah. The first time she came over, she brought a pie. Homemade, still warm. She wore a simple dress, no makeup, and looked at Adam the way I hadn't seen anyone look at him in years, like he was someone worth loving. She didn't try too hard. She didn't flatter or pretend. She just sat with us, asked questions and listened. And when Adam reached for her hand across the table, she squeezed it back, gently, without even looking down. That small gesture told me everything. Over the next few months, she became part of our lives. She helped Adam stay focused on his recovery, encouraged him when he doubted himself, and brought laughter into our home again. Then, one Sunday morning, Adam showed up with a nervous look on his face and a folded piece of paper in his hand. Frank and I were having coffee on the back porch when he handed it to us. "What's this?" Frank asked. "It's from the doctor," Adam said, scratching the back of his neck. "Sarah's pregnant." My breath caught. Frank stared at the paper, blinking. "You're going to be a dad again?" Adam nodded, eyes wide, like a kid admitting he'd broken something valuable. But this time, it wasn't broken. It was real. And it was good. Tears welled up in my eyes as I stood and wrapped my arms around him. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. He held on tightly. "I'm going to do it right this time, Mom. I promise." And he did. When their daughter was born, they named her Grace. A name that felt like it belonged in our family all along. She had Adam's dark hair and Sarah's sweet dimples. She smiled in her sleep and liked the sound of rain tapping on the windows. I spent my mornings holding her while Sarah napped and Adam worked in the garden with Frank. I would watch them from the kitchen window. Father and son, side by side, trimming the roses. There was something healing in that sight. A quiet message that even broken things could grow again. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, the doorbell rang. There was no return address on the envelope in the mailbox. Just a photo inside. A little boy with a wide smile and big brown eyes. On the back, in neat handwriting, it said, "David. 6 months." I knew who it was from. I took the picture into the kitchen and sat down at the table, running my fingers over the edges. He looked so much like Marcus. So innocent. So untouched by the lies that brought him into the world. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just felt peace. Because even after all that pain, there was still life. Still growth. Still hope. That night, I told Frank about the photo. "Do you think she's okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "But I hope she is. For David's sake." He nodded slowly. "Do you regret helping her?" "No," I said after a pause. "She didn't deserve our trust. But the baby did. And if that small gesture gave him a better start, then it was worth it." We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't feel heavy anymore. Later, I watched Grace sleep in her crib, her tiny hands curled into fists, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. She would grow up loved. She would grow up safe. And she would never know the lies that nearly tore us apart. Because we had stopped them in time. Spring came early that year. The flowers in our garden bloomed before the calendar said they should. The daffodils lined the walkway like golden lanterns, and the roses, the ones Frank had pruned so carefully, were fuller than ever. Everything felt lighter. Like life had opened its windows and let in some much-needed air. Adam and Sarah moved into a small home just 3 blocks away. Close enough to visit often, far enough to feel like they were building their own life. They came over every Sunday for dinner. Grace loved being rocked on our porch swing. Sometimes she'd fall asleep in my arms, her tiny mouth open just a little, her head resting against my shoulder. Holding her reminded me of when Adam was a baby. It felt like life had come full circle. Not perfect, not easy, but still beautiful. One evening, as we cleared the table after dinner, Sarah took my hand gently. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "For what, sweetheart?" "For everything," she said. "For welcoming me. For being kind. For giving Adam space to become the man I love." I squeezed her hand. "He did the hard work himself. But I'm glad you were there when he did." She smiled and helped me dry the dishes. Adam joined Frank in the living room, laughing at some home improvement video they were watching. I could hear their voices through the doorway. Deep, familiar, peaceful. It had been a long time since laughter came that easily. A few days later, I was out shopping when I saw someone I hadn't expected. Marcus's sister, Elena. She worked at a bookstore in town, and I hadn't seen her in months. She waved when she noticed me. "Helen," she said, walking over. "It's good to see you." "And you," I replied. "How's everything?" She gave me a tired smile. "It's been up and down. Callie's still in Phoenix. She's working now part-time, and she's taking care of David." I nodded slowly. "How is he?" "David's healthy. Happy. He's a sweet boy," she said. "Looks just like Marcus." There was a quiet pause between us. Neither of us knew what to say next. The past sat between us like a shadow, but it didn't feel threatening anymore. Just a part of our shared story. "I'm glad he has you," I said finally. "She's trying," Elena said. "Callie, I mean. It's not easy for her. But she's not the same person anymore. Motherhood has changed her. She's softer." I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Maybe part of me still carried anger. But another part, the part that had watched her drive away from my house months ago, felt tired of holding on to it. "She made a lot of mistakes," I said quietly. But I never wanted her destroyed. I just wanted her out of our lives before she could cause more harm. She knows that, Elena said. She told me once that you gave her the only real kindness she's ever known. That surprised me. I hadn't done much, at least, it hadn't felt like it at the time. But maybe kindness didn't need to be loud to matter. We said goodbye with a polite smile and a little more peace in our hearts. That night, I told Frank about the conversation. He sat quietly for a while, then said, "Maybe she really is trying to be better." "I hope so," I replied. Weeks passed. Grace took her first steps in our backyard, chasing a butterfly in her little blue shoes. Adam caught her just as she stumbled, lifting her into the air with a laugh so full of love, I thought my heart might burst. Sarah snapped a photo on her phone, and later that evening, she sent it to me with a message. "I hope she grows up with your strength, Helen." I stared at the photo long after they had gone home. Grace in midair, Adam smiling, the sunlight catching in her hair. That was my family now. Not the perfect family I once imagined, but a real one, shaped by pain and recovery, built on truth instead of illusion. Sometimes at night, I would lie awake and replay everything. The whispers, the lies, the betrayal. And I would wonder what might have happened if I had never found that envelope. If I had just ignored my instincts. If I had stayed quiet to keep the peace. But then I'd remember something else. The look on Adam's face the day he met Grace. The way Frank had cried when she said, "Papa," for the first time. The way Sarah smiled at me like she had known me forever. That was the reward. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just the quiet return of peace. And I learned something too. That families aren't defined by blood alone. They're built by choice, by the decisions we make when everything falls apart. By how we choose to pick up the pieces. In the end, I didn't expose Callie to ruin her. I exposed the truth to protect what mattered most. My son, my marriage, and the future of the child who would never grow up in a house built on lies. Some people thought I was too quiet, too polite. That I didn't fight back hard enough. But here's what I've learned. You don't always need to shout to win. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who stays calm, who waits, who plans, who protects quietly, and speaks the truth only when it matters most. And sometimes, the most powerful kind of revenge is healing. It was a warm afternoon in early summer when I sat on the porch with Grace in my lap, watching the world move on. Our street was quiet, lined with blooming trees and the sounds of lawnmowers in the distance. The breeze was soft, and the baby in my arms cooed at the wind like it was whispering secrets just for her. She was growing fast, standing now, pointing at birds, trying to say words. Her little fingers curled around mine, and I held on to her like she was a piece of my heart made real. Frank sat nearby, sipping lemonade and reading a paperback. He looked up from his book and smiled at us. That simple look said everything. We had survived. More than survived. We had rebuilt. And I knew then, as sure as anything, that we had made the right choices. Not because they were easy, but because they were necessary. Later that day, I sat down to write. Not a letter to Callie, not a journal, not even a note to myself. Just a way to organize everything in my mind. So much had happened, and I wanted to put it somewhere outside my heart. I started with what had mattered most. That the truth, no matter how painful, had set us free. I remembered the weight of pretending, the fear of speaking up, the nights I lay awake wondering if I was wrong or just afraid to be right. But when I finally faced the truth head-on, it didn't crush me. It cleared the way. The quiet strength it took to sit through lies, to collect proof, to wait for the right moment. That was the kind of strength no one sees in movies or books. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was patient, gentle, steady. And that strength had saved my family. I thought about Adam and how far he had come. The man who once buried his shame behind secrets was now someone who faced things head-on. He spoke about his addiction openly at meetings. He shared his journey with others. He helped younger men who came in feeling lost and afraid. And every time I saw him holding his daughter, I knew he would never go back to the man he had been. Frank and I had grown too. We had faced a truth that could have broken us. But instead it pulled us closer. Not just because we forgave each other, but because we learned to see each other as whole people. Flaws, fears, regrets and all. For the first time in years, we were truly honest. And as for Callie, I didn't hate her. She had made terrible choices, yes. She had hurt people. lied, manipulated. But I also saw someone who had been afraid. Someone who had grabbed for control when life was spinning. Someone who, deep down, didn't trust the world to be kind to her. And when we had finally said goodbye, I hadn't screamed. I hadn't wished her pain. I had given her something she'd never expected. A way out. That had been the beginning of our healing. The last thing I wrote that day was this. You don't win by hurting someone worse than they hurt you. You win by refusing to become like them. I closed the notebook and went into the kitchen to start dinner. Adam and Sarah were coming over with Grace, and we were planning to have a barbecue in the backyard. The grill had been cleaned, the chairs set out, the string lights hanging between the trees. Frank came in behind me and put his arms around my waist. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I am. Really? He kissed the side of my head. Me too. That evening was simple. Grilled corn, chicken, lemonade, laughter. Grace chased bubbles while Adam flipped burgers. Sarah brought out a bowl of strawberries and kissed Adam's cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. And it was. That's what love looked like. Not grand gestures. Not perfection. Just showing up every day, trying your best, telling the truth, and forgiving where you can. After dinner, we all sat under the stars. Grace had fallen asleep on Frank's chest, her tiny body rising and falling with each of his breaths. Adam leaned over and said quietly, You know, Mom, if it weren't for you, I don't know where I'd be. I smiled at him. You'd still be you. Just a little lost. And you'd have found your way eventually. He shook his head. You saved me. You knew the truth. And instead of yelling, instead of shaming me, you waited until I was ready. You gave me space to see it myself. That takes more strength than I think I'll ever have. I placed my hand over his. You'll have that strength when you need it. One day, when Grace needs something hard from you, you'll remember how it felt to be given grace yourself. And you'll pass it on. He didn't say anything after that. He just looked down at his daughter and smiled. When they left that night, Frank and I sat together in the quiet. The garden light swayed gently in the breeze, and the stars blinked softly above us. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. Because some victories don't need to be spoken. They're lived. Breathed. Carried. The years moved gently after that. Seasons came and went like soft waves. Nothing too harsh, nothing too still. Life had its usual ups and downs, of course, but the chaos that once wrapped itself around our family never returned. We had learned too much. Grown too much. Loved too honestly to let that kind of darkness take root again. Grace grew taller every day. She was 6 now, clever and curious, always asking questions that made me laugh or pause and think. She called me Nana and believed without question that I could fix anything. Broken toys, scraped knees, even rainy days that ruined picnic plans. One morning, as we baked cookies together in my kitchen, she asked, Nana, what's a secret? I froze for a moment, the spoon in my hand hovering over a bowl of flour. 100 memories rushed in, the whispers, the lies, the paper hidden behind the toilet, Callie's voice in my ear. For a second, I wasn't sure what to say. But then I looked at her. Pure. Sweet. Innocent. And I gave her the only answer that felt right. A secret, I said softly, is something people sometimes keep when they're afraid of what will happen if they tell the truth. Is it bad to keep secrets? She asked. Sometimes, I replied. Especially if the truth can help someone. Even if it's hard to say. She thought about it for a while, her tiny hands pressing cookie dough into shapes. Then she nodded. Then I think I'll just tell the truth. Even if it's scary. I smiled and kissed the top of her head. That's the bravest thing you can do, sweetheart. Because that was the lesson, wasn't it? The truth doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it brings tears. Sometimes it breaks hearts. But it also clears the air. It frees the soul. And it makes space for something better to grow in its place. When I looked back at everything that had happened, the betrayal, the broken trust, the nights I cried silently into my pillow, I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I felt pride. Because I had chosen patience over revenge. Courage over comfort. Truth over fear. And in doing so, I hadn't just protected my family. I had rebuilt it. Stronger. Softer. Wiser. Adam was thriving. He had paid off his debts, slowly but surely. He had become a sponsor for others in recovery, and every week, he and Sarah volunteered at the community center. Grace followed him everywhere, believing her daddy was the smartest man in the world, and in many ways he was. Frank retired officially, though he still spent mornings trimming hedges and humming to himself like he was getting ready for something important. He told me once that those hours in the garden were when he felt closest to God, when his hands were in the soil, and his thoughts were clear. As for me, I didn't need anything more. Not praise. Not recognition. Just these moments, warm coffee on the porch, Grace's laughter in the hallway, and the quiet strength of knowing I had done the right thing, even when it hurt. Sometimes, people imagine that revenge will heal them. That exposing someone, tearing down everything they built, will bring peace. But the truth is, revenge only feeds the wound. Real peace, lasting peace, comes from choosing something harder: integrity, patience, and the courage to be kind even when it's not returned. That's what I chose. And that's why I sleep at night with no regrets. So if you're ever standing at a crossroads, one path leading toward anger and the other toward calm, one filled with fire and the other with silence, I hope you'll remember this. You don't always need to scream to be heard. You don't always need to fight to win. And sometimes the greatest justice is simply living well and making sure the people you love have the chance to do the same.